Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to our PDO's LinkedIn Live. Here we talk about the account based sales revolution. And today we have a super relevant topic. We're talking about best in class sales metrics in an economic downturn. It's the beginning of the year. So we wanted to kick it off with a big bang. And that's why you're here, Carl. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a big pleasure. It's a big pleasure. You're a big role model for many entrepreneurs out there in Europe, but also in the US. And yeah, this is also where your journey started in the US with the famous Y Combinator. And yeah, I'm super happy for having you here today.
No, thanks for having me. This is first time for myself as well. I've done, I don't know how many hundreds of live webinars and other platforms and live events, but this is the first one actually speaking on LinkedIn Live. So I'm very excited to be here. And I think also very relevant topic as we've kicked off 2023 with a lot of different perspectives or the different markets to address going into this year with everything that's going on.
And Carl, what we always do at the beginning, let's kick it off with a brief introduction from yourself, and maybe you can share a bit about yeah, your personal journey and your journey with Get Accept.
Yep, I'll do the short version of it. There's also a long version. We can take that on a different date. But I'm Swedish originally. I spent a lot of my adult life abroad. We started Get Accept, what is it now, almost 7 years ago, with the ambition to see if we can grow into some bigger boots than just being entrepreneurs around Northern Europe and trying that for some time. So I've started 3 companies in total. Get Accept is the third. Lived through, I think, all of the challenges and done all the errors you can make as an entrepreneur. But yeah, we got into Y Combinator in the US and have ever since then been a US-based company trying to see if we can be one of the top SaaS and startups in the world, and not just looking at Sweden or Scandinavia as a market. So that is a little bit about that story. Now, fast forward 7 years, we're 200 people spread around in 7 different countries. We have clients in 50 different markets, with Europe being, together with the US, the 2 biggest market that we address on a daily basis.
And can you share a bit more about what Get Accept is actually doing? What
Yeah,
is
yeah.
it?
I don't like to sell our product in these. I like to share hopefully some golden nuggets and something from our learnings, and hopefully it's something that helps people become better sales leader or salespeople. But essentially, that's what we do. Get Accept was founded on the idea that 7 years ago, like, we spend so much time creating these fantastic opportunities into the pipeline. You log them in your CRM, and then they go out in the what we call the valley of death. Nothing happens. You have no response, and you don't have efficiency in the opportunity to close process. So what Get Accept does is a digital sales room platform that helps you improve win rates from opportunity to close. So instead of having a proposal tool, e-signing tool, video tool, content management tool, we have everything in one link that lives on, where you can communicate and engage and enable your buyer to have just a better journey between stakeholders and ultimately sign that deal. Of course, sync to CRMs like your partners with Salesforce, right? Those are one of our biggest partners that we go to market to.
Okay, yeah, super interesting. I was lucky enough to get a look into Get Accept and the solution. Super interesting. But bringing it back to the session here today, Carl. One thing when we kind of prepped for the topic of the session and the content, with marketing, we were going back and forth if we should call it best in class sales metrics in a recession or in an economic downturn. I don't know if you have a strong opinion on that. Are we hitting a big recession with markets shaking, or is it going to be more of a soft landing?
I mean, take my advice on that then with a pinch of salt. I'm good at entrepreneurship and SaaS and sales, but when we look at the broader macroeconomics of stuff, I think, of course, we're going into a recession. I mean, I don't know, technically in some countries, maybe just end up in a downturn rather than a recession, right? But no matter what, there's really tough times ahead, and certain industries are significantly more impacted. For example, tech of any sort than SaaS. So
Mm.
I think all in all, everybody understands. I mean, the trend that's been going on. Look at what's been happening in terms of layoffs. Take the best SaaS company and B2B cloud company of all time, Salesforce, making giant layoffs. It's obviously a receipt that if you don't think you're impacted, you're lying to yourself.
Yeah, no, and maybe let's park the macroeconomic development for now. What I would like to start the session with, could you give us a bit of an outlook on 2023 in a sales context, and maybe can you tell us a bit about the trends that you're seeing in sales?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of big trends that I've seen. I mean, we've spent a lot of times, and I spent a lot of time talking to other founders of other companies and other sales leaders, or in our investor portfolio and so forth. And I think one part is obviously going to be sales efficiency and cash efficiency in the sales motion. So taking a look at your customer acquisition cost and your CAC payback times when it comes to that end. And when we're talking efficiency, layoffs are obviously happening. You don't have the same availability to just fuel growth with adding headcount. So the trend there is, I think from a sales leader's perspective, we have to ensure, have we built a process, an enablement process, a coaching process, a revenue operations process that helps those individual contributors and teams to be more successful? Can we increase quota capacity on them rather than adding headcount? I think that will be the biggest trend, of course, in efficiency. Other part, when you look at software that you use to support your process, I think we're seeing a trend of consolidation. If you starting to look at other platforms like Outreach, Salesloft, how they phrase or position their products, for example, or how we position our product, it's consolidation and doing more with less with your platforms. And I think that's going to be a big trend. So again, big trend in consolidation and ensuring that you have quality on your sales team and making sure that they're successful.
Yeah. And one point you mentioned before regarding macroeconomics, I think one thing where we all have common ground, where we all have the same understanding, we are in a difficult time. We're in a difficult market, and I think that's what makes this topic today so relevant, right? And what are these best in class metrics? That's the topic, and I want to dive into this right away. And maybe you can share your thoughts on this for sales leaders. What are the metrics that help them navigate this economic downturn?
Yeah, I think when you look at sales metrics, and I'll give a little bit of background, right? Like one thing that you learn when you go to Y Combinator, for example, or you have investors in Silicon Valley, you're constantly compared to the absolutely best companies in the world, because that the tier A investors want tier A companies. They want a best in class net retention. They want best in class revenue growth. They want best in class in terms of product and NPS, right? And I think when it comes to your own numbers, and now speaking to everyone who's listening to here, there's maybe some people working on those global giants, or some people working at smaller startups, or a local startup in Denmark, Sweden, Germany, Spain, or whatever it may be, right? They look a little bit different in certain parts of the journey. But I think also one part, it's important to track the correct metrics and not just look at something. Revenue growth, of course, is really, really important. But where are you driving revenue today? What type of segment and cohort? Because best-in-class sales metrics need to take into account now maybe your go-to-market strategy into a certain segment or a certain vertical is significantly more impacted by the economic setting that we have today. So when you look at those metrics, but in general, for example, one best-in-class metric that I think is really, really important to look at is what do you have in terms of your quota to cost ratio, meaning how much does your sales rep costs? How much quota do you have to them? And of course, then looking at quota attainment. But I've had in my head since day one, when I've understood what's best when you look at the best companies, we want to be somewhere around the 4 to 5 to 6 mark in SMB for software, for example. So essentially, are you paying somebody 100K? They need a 400 to 500K quota to making sure that you have a really profitable model. So looking at that is really important. if you're an SDR, for example, or SDR manager, not just looking how many opportunities can you book or how many meetings can you book, what's the actual conversion throughout the funnel, and looking more granular, how is certain verticals performing? So even if you're successful in setting meetings, what's the quality of those meetings? So start measuring quality. Again, like I mentioned before, you have to look at improving quality on your reps, because you can't just add headcount to add more opportunities. I think looking at those metrics is going to be a little bit of a different change. And I'm not saying people are not looking at them, but those will become significantly more important, because you can't just invest to fuel yourself out of maybe lacking quality in a certain area.
And when we talked the other day, one thing that stuck in my head, I thought this was super interesting, was you said, everybody went through the 2023 budgets, and there were three kind of setups, where you said, okay, the first one is, okay, do I have enough money in the bank to spur this growth? And if not, is this growth fueled by larger sales teams with higher quotas? Or is it by maintaining the quota and reducing the sales teams? Yeah, so super interesting.
Yeah, no, of course, and that's what you have to understand. What do we have to play with? I think everybody who's listening today has obviously had those conversations with their CEO or had those conversations on board level to figure out what's the budget. And I think everybody's planning for two scenarios today. We have this scenario where we want to achieve it, right? But what's going to happen going into June? Are we going to adjust our end of year targets due to the fact realizing we don't have capacity? We're not able to increase quality. And what is the impacts to the business if we don't achieve them? So I think people have different settings, and you have to take that into account.
And the follow-up question here, taking this a bit further, as a sales leader, how do you help teams to adapt to these metrics and maybe also to these potential changes, while still having them to hit, or still have them hit their growth numbers?
Yeah, I think anyone who's listening, and this is an open question, I'm assuming pretty much every sales team have increased quotas here for January or going into Q2, for example. Maybe you have increased quota, Max, I don't know, but I'm assuming that's the case, right? So of course, this happens every year at every company. But from our perspective, how we've led Get Accept and the experience that we've had in the past, I think from a leadership perspective, to enable your individual contributors, your reps, you really have to help them to understand. Hopefully you're hiring really smart people, but help them to understand the metrics, how they're contributing to the overall performance. I think transparency in how you calculate these things and actually openly talking to them, displaying them. For example, we look at our sales all hands at Get Accept every single month, where I, to the entire team, try to really explain to them what's happening to our business, what is it that we're seeing from an executive level that we need to achieve, and then try to distill that down on individual level. So for example, if you take that cost to quota ratio, I think there's a lot of reps and a lot of companies who have no understanding how profitable they are as an individual in a sales team. So for example, getting that in front of them. So if you've hired great people and you give them great engaging questions on how they can improve, they will find a way. And I think that's how you enable people. Or you can just say, hey, you have increased quota, go and hit your quota, make some more phone calls, create some more opportunities, close some business. I don't think that's very empowering. And I think hopefully people are not doing it that way. But I think a good reminder is to ensure that you're transparent with your numbers and how they contribute, because great people will find a way. And they will get better when it comes to quality if you engage them in that process.
And also something that came already a bit through now is that it's a bit of a dilemma, also a dilemma for the companies, right? They want to maintain a growth rate that is acceptable for their ambition, but now they also have to look into cash efficiency, right?
I think this is something that personally, as a founder and as a sales leader, we have to come to terms with, right? Like, first of all, we have to look at a little bit from a bigger picture, that this is the first time when talking to investors and people looking at valuations of companies, where a slower growing company with good cash efficiency can actually be higher value than a faster growing company with a low cash efficiency.
Yeah.
So for example, if you have a 0.5x, you're spending $1 to get 50 cents in revenue versus having 1-to-1, there's a significant discount now on the valuations and the multiples on those companies when you do investment. So now you actually have an opportunity to work with quality and those metrics in your company. So maybe this gives you, I think I like to look at things from the half full perspective, right? Maybe this gives you the opportunity to look at your metrics and look at certain metrics that you maybe discounted away before because you've had this enormous pressure to just grow 80%, 100%, 150%, whatever it is. And maybe now you have a growth target on 40, 50, 60 instead, and finding sustainability into that one. So I think that's one part. And I think you have to make sure that you invest in the coaching and support and development of people. I think that is going to be key. Do you have a setup where you have a motion for coaching and improving? So if you see then, looking at and measuring the correct metrics, are we failing going from proposal to negotiation? Is it the pricing where people get stuck? Is it because we present the wrong solution? Are we making it too complex? And then coach each team or team member. And I think another part is looking at where does the sales leader come from is usually a good indication what they're good at. We have sales leaders get accept to come from the account management side of things. They usually are very good at upselling and expansion and net retention. And then we have other sales leaders who are, pure hunters. They're really good at new revenue. Like, so understanding these things and the efficiency on the team, pairing the teams up is really, really important. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's better that you set quotas that are reasonable so you reach them, so you don't end up in June thinking, damn it, I have to lay off 10 people because we put some high goal that was not attainable.
And this is also tying into my next question, and I know this is something you burn for, and this is risk. So for companies that are trying to figure out, okay, what are the right metrics for us, what risks do they face, and is there a risk where they might cheat themselves looking into the wrong ones?
Yeah, I think so. It's of course, like I think one learning that we've had from being in Silicon Valley is that at the end of the day, the best advisors and people you search for help, a lot of them tell you know your business better than anyone else. You're the one speaking to your customers, to your sales team. You understand the market, etc. So making sure that are you just grabbing a sales metrics because you found it from some type of content, or hey, this sounded good, I need to be at 5x, for example. You have to apply that to your business. The other side of things is, of course, I've chatted with a lot of sales leaders over the years, and we sell to revenue leaders and VPs of sales and CROs. A lot of them sometimes track, I think, the wrong metrics. They look at vanity metrics that make them look good. And I think that's, if, for example, if you're an SDR manager, it's very easy to just measure, hey, we create so many meetings, but what's the actual conversion? Can we improve the quality on how we perform those meetings? Can we push them closer in the calendar to pull revenue closer in? Can we accelerate that revenue motion? So I think really looking and understanding of metrics and what's contributing to the outcome of those metrics than just tracking a vanity metrics for the sake of it.
And of course it's always this thing, for example, the SDR case where it's easier to look into calls and the numbers of meetings booked, and it gets a bit more complicated if you have to actually analyze, okay, what quality came out of these meetings, what was our conversion rate, and so on.
Yeah, but if you're an SDR, for example, Max, everything you do is based on trying to create that opportunity. And in the end, to create opportunities, you need conversations with people to understand them. Are they a good match? Can we qualify them into an opportunity, etc.? So having those additional metrics to track your conversations, for example, maybe you have a problem with activity, solve that, but then don't think that just having activity will create value at the end of the day. Then you have to start tracking something else. Okay, what's the outcome of it? Okay, we get more conversations. How good are we now at really understanding that buyer? And then again, if you have a different setup with a new market and you're entering a new market or a new vertical, do you actually understand that buyer and are accurate enough to talk to them and create some sense of urgency to want to take that demo or that sales call or that sales meeting or whatever the conversion you're trying to achieve?
And one other part of this question, get accept was been, yeah, always challenged by the Silicon Valley thinking, right? And the Silicon Valley metrics and the comparison to really kind of, yeah, raise you to become this global player. But what about companies that maybe are not in this environment, that are maybe here in Scandinavia, that maybe start using metric that or maybe for them it's a bit more difficult to look into these metrics to compare them more with global players, but are maybe more leaning towards metrics that are maybe better suited for more local champions.
Yeah. And it applies the same thing. I think you have to
Yeah.
be smart. Like, don't just look at any company and look at their metrics and be, oh, I should do the same thing, right? You have to. If I start a company in Sweden and I'm addressing the Swedish market, for example, I'm Swedish, I know the market fairly decent now after a couple of tries here and errors, but understanding what is other companies that are similar to me doing, what are the most successful ones doing. What I do when I try to found, and I think again we're talking about coaching and enabling the individual contributors, I have to, as a sales leader, search for information and speak to other sales leaders. I believe I have the answers and can figure them out on my own by talking here internally. I don't think I'm very intelligent. I need to take a look at other companies, and that's my recommendation to any sales leader. Find a mentor, find coaches, find advisors, and they don't necessarily be someone on an advisor board or a board. Just have some people that you can bounce ideas off and understanding what other ones are doing and apply them accurately to your business. So you don't just say, hey, we're just going to be best in class and this is the metric that we're going after. Okay, wait. If we put that metric into play in our business model and our existing performance, how does that play out? What do we need to do to get there? So maybe that's a moonshot goal that you have in the future, but what's the milestones you have to achieve to get there?
And Carl, I'm sorry that I'm jumping here a bit around with different topics, but there's another thing that I would like to double click on, something you said that I thought is super interesting, and it was about revenue, where you said not every revenue is necessarily the right revenue. Maybe you can put some words to that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds, yeah, of course you want revenue, right? We track annual recurring revenues, ARR. So to give you an example, I mean, now you have, let's say you have a sales force and you have 10 salespeople, just for the ease of it. You have a limited amount of time now. You can't just add headcount as you maybe were able to in the past. What are they spending time on? Are you cheating yourself, running after the wrong segment? Maybe you're creating revenue, but is it an inefficient motion? Is it inefficient based on you're spending too much marketing to get in deals that you then feel you have to take care of? And at the end of the day, they're generating too bad metrics on the revenue side. Maybe they churn more often. So are you actually targeting to the correct markets? And I think everybody has to have a critical thinking today. What is my verticals? What's my ideal customer profile today? How are they impacted by the current economic downturn? And what are my risks associated with that? So if I'm heavily invested in three verticals, for example, if my one revenue vertical is heavily impacted and I'm knowing that people will churn in there, why are you running after revenue? Then maybe you have to take the decision, hey, say no to this revenue to focus on a more cash efficient revenue motion in a different vertical. Maybe you're more successful now converting outbound because you don't have the same marketing demand that you had in the past because things are changing. So you have to look at throughout the entire revenue funnel and understanding what's happening throughout that journey for every customer.
With the revenue in sales, right? You're always looking for revenue and trying to close deals. But if you sometimes maybe like you need to take a step back and actually ask yourself, okay, but what are the costs that come with this revenue? So I think that's a super interesting.
There's an alternative cost to everything, Max. So I think that's where you have to be critical about it. But it's of course very hard to say no when you know there's some revenue on the side and you have far to find it. But if you really want to make a pivotal change to your growth rate or your acceleration in growth, you have to dare to take choices that maybe are hard to make. And that may be say, hey, we need to cut this and we need to do something else. Because maybe you need to reinvest that in a better motion that's better, where you have higher average contract values, better net retention, and can have a better revenue motion long term.
And what you also touched upon now was the verticals, and this was also one of the questions I had prepared. We talked about 2023 now, and had a little outlook on what's happening now in the next year, and the metrics to track. But if we go back, if we look into 2021, 2022, um, companies that were heavily selling into one vertical that was then yeah, had problems because of the pandemic, they ran into big problems, right? um what are some learnings maybe out of that, and maybe how can you hedge your risks in 2023?
Yeah. I talked to two different US companies here over the Christmas and New Year's break a bit, two founders that I know, and we talked a lot about this. And one of them were being very successful in 2022, and they saw some changes going into the end of the year. I think uh, continuing down that path where they've been successful, but they were also very hesitant about, for example, what's going to happen with that vertical that they were successful in. So the discussion that we had, could you find something else to go after and see if there's an opportunity to hedge your bets a bit? So I think it's important to have one part of your sales team exploring a little bit maybe uncharted territory to understand, is there different alternatives that we can walk? Because if you're getting hit, for example, let's say that we take the pandemic as an example. Every person who sold to hospitality companies, hotels, and that services, everything went down. People started churning and stuff like that. That was temporary, though. Now we see an increased spend in that one. So don't take any rash decision. It's not about cutting everything, but if stuff like that happen, you have to be prepared. You have to have an understanding, or do you have enough research in your sales motion to pick up on these things, what's happening to different verticals and understanding them. I think one thing that we learned that always echoes in the back of my head and is in my vertebrae, that Y Combinator always told us: talk to your users, and if you talked enough to your users, talk some more. And that's talking about the software company, but it applies to anyone. Talk to your customers. And I think as a sales leader, I need to be in sales conversations. I need to be in sales meetings, because I'm always going to hear everything otherwise in two layers of translation and actually hearing what people say. So we use Chorus for tracking our meetings. I listen to a lot of these meetings to understand, hey, what's the challenges that we have? What's the actual challenges that this customer has? How can we help them, or how can't we help them? Is this a good alternative for our products? I think being curious as a sales leader is a necessity if you want to be best.
Yeah. And Carl, as much as I love talking to you, we're coming a bit to an end. So let's wrap this up, and I would like to wrap it up with another question we always ask our guests here. If you have one main recommendation or learning for sales leaders, what would that be?
No, just revise and make sure your metrics are in order.
Yeah.
Don't take for granted that metrics going into 2022 necessarily has to be the same as in 2023. Understand your business. That's number one. Then number two, I mentioned it a couple of times, but invest in the coaching and enablement motion. At the end of the day, if you can help your reps to sell more, of course, you're more successful as a company. But it comes to the other side of it, is you need to retain your talent. If you have wrong attrition on your individual contributors, it's going to become very costly, right? So, and one part is people are slowing down recruiting, which means you don't have that same access to talent maybe as you did before, because that motion has been paused. So again, coaching and enablement is I think going to be a big subject, combined with revenue operations to ensure you have an efficient sales process. So I think you can't invest enough time and resources there that you have available, at least.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think it was a great session. Also, thank you everyone watching the session today. I think there were a lot of learnings and nuggets, and yeah, we'll have our next LinkedIn Live in February. Make sure to follow, get accept, and our PD on LinkedIn to stay tuned what's happening. And yeah, see you in February. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Max.
Bye-bye.
Great to be here.